This is the reason why you should buy. And we're not asking the most important question, the reason why it was important for them, in their heart of hearts. Like, that's a sale. Then we're going to see results, the mindset. Going into every opportunity, saying to yourself, I would love to have the business, but I don't need the business. When they talk about building their organization just through referral, that means they're missing it. The internet almost shut down because they're like, are you blind? Do you not know what's going on out there? Do you not see what's happening?
You just did 250,000 cold calls. Congratulations. Welcome to the Pipe Podcast. I'm your host, Crispin Cruz. We have Bernadette McClelland with us today, and I'm so excited to have you on, Bernadette. This is wonderful. And so for those that are watching and those that are listening, of course, the Pipe Podcast, we talk about sales process, sales initiatives, right? Sales prospecting and sales experiences. So we're going to dig into that today with Bernadette. And thank you so much for being on today, Bernadette. It means a lot for you to be here. Thank you.
Oh, I'm really impressed with that intro. So I'm excited to be part of the energy of your show, Crispin.
Oh, this is great. Well, it's going to be great. And so I'd like to just jump right into it, if you don't mind. And, tell us a little bit about, Bernadette, tell us a little bit about this whole, thing that you're doing with Shift and Disrupt and, sales and just give us a little background, if you don't mind.
Yes, sure. So, I've been in the sales world for so many years now. I was really fortunate. I became, enamored with the sales profession way back when I was at Xerox in Melbourne, and I was a sales coordinator there and was able to do the sales guys' commissions and look at the amount of money that they were making back in the 80s and the caliber that were making it. I thought, if they can do it, so can I. And so that kind of kicked off my sales journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very, very fortunate to have been trained, been given all the learnings that that the solution selling, consultative selling, all of those are based on. And so my journey continued on, and I experienced small business, bricks and mortar, business ownership, corporate sales, solopreneur sales, all of these different kind of avenues, if you like, where business people have to sell. And, whilst the product might be different, the service might be a different offering, the target market may be different, there are still some fundamentals that we need to have under our belt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always just having the right script on how to open up a prospecting sale or how to close a deal. There's so much in the middle part there. And so part of my journey has also been the fact that I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins.
Yeah, sure.
So I was his master coach for Asia Pacific across 12 countries. So being able to kind of peel back the onion or see what's behind the curtain when it comes to entrepreneurs and business owners, leaders, CEOs, all different types. Once again, that kind of gave me a different feel for what's needed, and what people have as their, Achilles heels as well,
Right.
when it comes to business.
Right.
So if we take into account all of these different kind of, tool sets or whatever you want to call them, I'm looking at sales, and I coach and I train sales leaders and salespeople, in different industries, and I could see a gap, and also the the statistics, the research is telling us what's missing, and that is that our buyers are saying, you guys just aren't bringing to the table what we want. You're not bringing to the table what we need. And we can talk about researching our customers and, being the trusted advisor and doing research and all of that kind of stuff. But what does it mean when you're face to face with the buyer?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of looked at this and then I looked at, I did a little bit more research of my own around, different behaviors and things like that. We know the numbers that, 50, 51, 49, pick which number, but it's, either side of 50. 50% of buyers, sellers aren't making their numbers. And so I thought, okay, what can I bring to the table rather than just being another voice out there and just kind of like shouting the same old obvious cliches?
Right.
What can I do that's different and yet still supports the methodologies that we've all learned?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important. Like years and years ago, it was a case of just, grab the contract, get out there, sign the contract. The buyer knew no different. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Today, though, it's caveat venditor, let the seller beware.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we do that? And so I started to kind of create my own IP, bring some real deep thought leadership into the conversation. And I thought, okay, we got to shift and disrupt our own thinking in addition to shifting and disrupting our buyers' thinking.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And, it just, what you said earlier just resonates so loudly with me when we talk about, and I'd like to take you back like to the Xerox days, right? Because there was a very specific way that some of these organizations, and I'll say back in the day, yes, I own every single one of these gray hairs, right? So, and I can tell you probably where every single one came from. All right. But, back in the day, Bernadette, there was a very specific way that they wanted us to sell, right? And I mean, you were taught the Hewlett Packard way. You were taught the Hilton way. You were taught the Xerox way, right? And then something changed, right? And then there were changes in the market. There were changes in the way that we would engage with our prospect. There were changes in the way that we would do these little things called like bonding and rapport. There were changes, along the way, right? And so let's talk about some of those differences, if you wouldn't mind. Help our listeners and viewers maybe unpack some of that and what's changed.
Well, for me, and I've shared this story before, from Xerox's perspective, like, I mean, I was at Xerox for 20 years. So, the tone is in the blood, the culture's there. And so the company as a whole went through a massive shift in the 80s and the 80s and 90s. And that was as a direct result of the competitors. The Xerox had lost the patent for xerography, like for the copier side of things. Mm-hmm. And so the competition were just kind of hot on the heels waiting for that to happen. As soon as that happened, the Japanese jumped in. Now, the company as a global company needed to do something about that. And so what they did was they took us all through this quality through leadership. There was benchmarking with, companies like Toyota. There was this whole focus came in on customer satisfaction, customer delight. Mm-hmm. And I remember as a salesperson, I had one of the, I used to look after the universities. And so this particular university, I had a really great relationship with. Mm-hmm. And part of the process that Xerox went through is they would send out customer satisfaction surveys, but rather than them just being the blanket customer sat survey, it actually had my name on it from a sales perspective, the credit officer's name on it from that perspective, the tech's name. So it was very, very specific. Mm-hmm, I remember the comment coming back, and I was in the review with my sales manager at the time, and the comment came back, as far as bringing value to the table, Bernadette doesn't. And that was like,
What?
What do you mean I don't? I'm out there every week. I'm this, but therein lay the first lesson for me. And that is what I think value might be has nothing to do with what our buyer thinks value might be.
That's right. That's right.
You know, so that for me was a bit of a learning. Also, you know, when we were some of the other changes, very much a culture back then was see if you could get one call does it all.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very transactional, but over time that began to change, and we, you know, solution selling came in, spins, all of those professional selling skills. So we were very fortunate to have kind of gone through that transition as well, which went hand in hand also with analog to digital.
Right.
So it's like I am out there in the marketplace now, and it's funny, isn't it? There's the what's it called? The curse of knowledge. You heard of knowledge?
I have not. I'm writing it down now, though. I'm writing it down now.
So the curse of knowledge is when you think everyone knows what you think. You just think everyone knows what you know.
Right.
And so,
right.
You know, I've come out of Xerox and I've gone down another path for 10 years, you know, with our own business and all the rest of it. I come back into this arena like a decade ago with my own business, my own consultancy, and I just had this, call it naivety if you want to, but I just had this belief that people out there knew what I knew. Mm-hmm. And salespeople in sales teams knew what I knew because of my learning. And that was a big thing for me to overcome from a internal story perspective. Like, I'm just making this huge assumption as a sales consultant, leadership trainer, whatever it may be, people out there know what I know. And so all of a sudden I'm making all these assumptions. And so it's like another learning. Whoa. How can you bridge your consultative selling with all the work you've done around diplomas and stuff in executive coaching? How can you bring those together? And so just recently, it's like I've given it a lot of thought, and I'm thinking, okay, storytelling as we know it, which you go to storytelling and you'll get, you know, a hero's journey, you'll get, you know, Donald Miller, you'll get anecdote, you'll get these wonderful storytelling resources. And you look up story selling and you get presentation skills, you get marketing, you get branding, but there's nothing there specifically for the B2B sales profession.
Yep, you're right. And so let's go. That was it's like you're moving ahead in my question set here. I love it. But let's talk about that. Like the story selling philosophies. Let's talk a little bit about that and unpack that because this might be the first time that some of the listeners or viewers are actually hearing it. So, so could you give your perspective on that for us, please?
Yeah. So if we think about it, you know, story is our oldest form of communication. We know that. And selling is our oldest form of commerce, right?
Right. That's right.
So it's like, let's get this portmanteau, and a portmanteau is when two separate words are joined together. So let's get this portmanteau happening, and let's create some IP around it. Let's create some thought processes. Let's create some, you know, different models and different ways of thinking where it's specifically designed for the salesperson, the sales leader in a B2B environment, the business owner. It could be services, it could be startups. And let's also look at how we can stop selling widgets and start selling wisdom. So if we listen to what our buyers are telling us, they're saying, stop selling us and start booking us. So stop selling us your brochure, your product, you know, your widget, whatever it may be.
That's right.
Giving us what we want.
Yeah.
And so what the story selling philosophy is really all about is it brings in mindset, it brings in mental models, and it brings in more meaning to the sales conversation. obviously giving everybody more money.
Right.
And so if you were to draw, if you've got any listeners that listening there that want to kind of grab a pen and paper and draw a Venn diagram. So, you've got your circle at the top and you've got your two circles on either side.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we consider for a moment what a business wants from their sales team and what a salesperson or, a seller wants from their pipeline development.
Mm-hmm.
They want to create the right level of commitment, connection.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get the right connection with the right level of buyer.
Right. Right.
They also need to be able to have the depth of conversation
Mm-hmm.
that the buyer expects from them. And they need conversions. So there's no rocket science about that Venn diagram. You're looking at level of connection, depth of conversation, and acceleration of conversions.
Mm-hmm.
So where the magic happens is actually at the intersections of each of those circles. So when you look at connection and conversation, what's preventing that? I mean, really, when you think about it, what's preventing that when you're a seller and you're sitting there and you've got to make contact, it's your internal stories that you're telling yourself about the buyer.
Right.
About the deal, about the price. It's the internal stories you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It sure does. It sure does.
And at the intersection of the depth needed for your conversations and the conversions that you want from that are the external stories. Mm-hmm. And they're the stories that you're telling your buyer.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I can go into a little bit of depth of that. But the third one is the intersection of your conversions and the depth of your connections.
Mm-hmm.
And the intersection there are the essential stories. They are the stories you must elicit from your buyer.
Yeah.
And it's those third ones, like a three-legged stool. It's the third one, the essential stories, the stories you need to elicit from your buyer, that three-legged stool falls over, because it's that third leg that's missing most of the time.
Got it. I got it. Yeah.
So that's the philosophy of story selling. And then, of course, around that whole Venn diagram within each circle, I build it out again, and there's 3 stories. So there's in total 9 story modes that will help you with your growth.
It's great. It's just great stuff. I mean, I'm like I said, I hope they are. I hope that those that are listening or watching, I hope they are taking some notes. I know this is an oldie time, this is an oldie time invention. It's called the pen and the piece of paper,
Exactly. And so what happens here? So
right.
where I'm different, you might say, okay, well, that kind of sounds easy to do.
Right. Right.
But it's like, well, okay, so what are the 3 internal stories? And I would challenge anybody here, and this is where it comes to, I guess, my experience with all of that coaching, with the different, everything there, is the psychology behind it all, which are the 3 internal stories are identity, your identity. And yes, I get a little bit woo-woo there. It is because who's sitting in the driving seat? Your inner child or your adult?
Right. That's right.
Authority is a big thing. And you're wondering why people can't make contact with a CEO. So it's got nothing to do with not knowing what to say. In a lot of instances, it's your belief or your story that you're telling yourself about someone in authority.
Yeah.
And then the third part of that is money. And, let's get serious. Money has such emotional ties to us. We also need to look at that. Yeah. But you held up your piece of paper before and said, coming back to the, yes. So this is the second lot of stories where we talk about the stories you tell your buyer we know. So, Crispin, I'm going to throw it back to you for a second. What are a couple of stories that you would, call out as being stories that we could tell our buyer? Genres or stories or titles? What categories?
Yeah. So some of the stories, that, and my approach may not be a lot unlike yours, where I'm really, I'm using good questioning strategy. I'm using a lot of active listening when I'm engaging with a potential prospect. And so, Bernadette, to be completely transparent, a lot of times my story is directed by what I'm seeing the prospect or the buyer get excited about. So a lot of times then that directs me to, okay, do I start to tell then a third party story, as an example,
Okay, cool.
about one of my other prospects that may or may not be having the same challenge, right? But a lot of times I'm not just telling a story to tell a story, because I don't typically want to be just standing on my soapbox talking at the buyer and telling them, and continue to tell them, what I think is the benefit of them utilizing Sales Arbiter or utilizing our company. What I want to do is, I want to elicit what's important to them, and then frame certain experiences or stories that I have around them, and really make them the focus of the universe, make them the center of attention.
Love it. Love it. So what you referenced there was, tapping into the essential stories, definitely. But what you also referenced was reflecting on a story about another client or another person. So that is typically, and I use the word typically, when we talk about storytelling, that is typically where we go. It's like, okay, an origin story, a signature story, personal story, a success story of a company, our company story. They're the stories that we typically tell. And they're important. And I teach those as well.
Right.
However, when it comes to shift and disrupt, when it comes to those external stories that I'm talking about, I am literally talking about picking up a pen, because stories aren't just auditory. We tell stories, but we can also draw stories.
Right. Right.
And when we draw, we actually draw people in. And so the 3 chapters or the 3 external stories that are part of taking a conversation deeper, they include mental models. And this is where my approach is so unique.
Yeah, it's so good.
Because if you consider, let's take why your buyer. So let's think about a buyer's journey, right? We think about the buyer's journey. And I've got to be honest, to me, the buyer's journey that I see documented out there is really just a rejigged seller's journey. In my opinion. So for what that's worth, I like to be able to sit with somebody and articulate their buyer's journey from their perspective. So if you consider for a moment a value model or a progression model or a framework, which is like a ladder framework, which takes you from here to here, think Maslow's hierarchy.
Yep.
Think Claire Graves' spiral dynamics. Think Tony Robbins' 6 core needs. So there is a way to be able to sit with your buyer and be able to capture and tell and collaborate their buyer's journey personally.
Yeah.
So I teach that. That is one story, which is the progression. It's guiding change.
That's great.
That's what we've got to do. We've got to be able to guide our buyer through change.
That's great. I mean, I just so hope that, and again, these are golden nuggets. I hope that people are picking these up along the way and they're listening, because they're so And if you don't think Bernadette knows her stuff, I mean, she's pulling out, some of the best as it pertains to people that have really dedicated their life to this craft. And I can hear it in your voice, and I can hear the passion as well. Hey, I don't want to run out of time, so let's talk about this book, Shift and Disrupt. Let's talk about that. So if there are, first of all, thank you for being on and helping to showcase the book, because once it comes out and so and people start to read it and enjoy it and learn from it, I know they're going to love it. But let's talk about, what are maybe 3 things, Bernadette, that when the reader is turning those last few pages of the book, Shift and Disrupt, right? They're getting right to the end. What are you hoping, like 3 things that they take away from this, this book?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. First and foremost, I want them to identify the fact that the way they view themselves and the way that they have to take responsibility through their own internal stories, because those identity, authority, and money is like, wow, I've never thought about that before. I've never viewed it, because it's more than just teach me how to prospect. Everyone knows what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what to do, but why aren't we doing it? And ultimately, that needs to be addressed. And so that would be number one, is this full on taking responsibility and realizing that, if you don't broaden your, I call it like the sales Swiss Army knife, right? Mm-hmm. And it comes back to that thing of all you have is a hammer, everything you look at is a nail. and if and so if you don't broaden your thought leadership, your personal leadership, and your sales leadership, well, rather by broadening it, you're going to have a new tool set, and it's like the Swiss Army knife, and the blades and the bits and pieces hanging off that include story. Absolutely, you need to know how to bring the foundations of storytelling in. So story, mental models, psychology, neuro-linguistics, mm-hmm. and coaching, and the ability to coach.
Right.
So they're kind of the 5 tools that hang off the sales Swiss Army knife, for want of a better word.
Right.
So that would be number 1, is to get really clear on you. Number 2 is to embrace the concept of mental models. Because when you're sitting with a buyer over a coffee, or you're in a meeting and you've got a number of people around the table and it's going round and round in circles, or you're sitting there and there's, a lot of information coming, the ability for you to be able to synthesize that in a really noisy world, like I just did with you, grab your pen and paper and draw 3 circles.
Right.
All of a sudden, we've captured in 3 circles the essence of an idea. And when you're able to do that, whether it's a ladder, as I mentioned before, or a 2x2 matrix, or whether it's a Venn diagram, you will then be seen as somebody who is bringing true wisdom to the table, because it becomes collaborative. And you're telling your buyer's story back to them visually, and you will get 1,000% agreement.
Right.
So number 2 is embrace a different concept of thought leadership, sales leadership, personal leadership through mental models. And then thirdly is to adopt a coach approach, what I call a coach approach. And that is stop selling for a minute and learn how to coach. And so I teach 3 different coaching patterns that help you elicit the most important stories, which are the buyer's stories.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, they would be the 3 things that I would want people to walk away with.
That's great. Well, Shift and Disrupt, I'm telling you, is going to be an absolute winner. And when it makes the New York top seller, New York Times bestseller list. I just hope you remember, little Crispin Cruz, over at the Sales Arbiter and the Pipe podcast. So that's great. That's great. And I'm really looking forward to it. So
Thank
that's,
you.
if you don't mind, I'd like to just ask one more question. This is more around like process, and Bernadette, I mean, you are moving at the speed of business. You are, you're a speaker, you're a coach, you're an author. I mean, you go in and you consult for companies. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you're doing. How do you do it all? Like, how do you manage to keep on top of it? How do you do it all? Like, what's the secret for some of those entrepreneurs that are out there, or maybe even some just individuals that are having difficulty just managing the workload that they have? Tell our audience a little bit about that.
Well, first, my children are adults.
I guess that helps.
Secondly, I've moved from Australia to America. So, when you shift your environment, sometimes it just gives you a boost of energy. It's not Groundhog Day anymore. So I think, also it's been a journey for me. It's been, I've been bankrupt in the past 10 years. We've moved countries. There's a whole heap of stuff that happens, but that's life. And I think the number one thing is having faith. And when I talk about faith, I don't mean it from a religious context. I mean it from a context that you are exactly in the right place at the right time with the right people, and you must keep taking little steps forward, because I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow. Since I saw that movie, everything I look at now is through the lens of sliding doors. If I do this, something is going to happen as a result. I don't know what it is. So it's just like, give it up to the universe, just so long as I keep moving forward. And are there shitty days? Absolutely. Are there times that I don't want to do this? Absolutely. But I'm human. But the guiding principle is growth. It is to continue to just keep active, and it's purposeful.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, it's so, you're so right. And I just had this conversation with one of my clients earlier this week, and, they're having difficulty with just continuing to stay at the pace of growth. And, they're growing their company so quickly and organically, and they're adding so many new, new resources and new people and departments, and and they're just like, I don't, and I was talking with one of the mid-level managers about managing their time, and I said, sometimes it's just as simple as what my father said when he was in the Army. And he said, my sergeant would tell us, just keep moving, like, because it's a lot harder for your enemy to hit a moving target.
And I would add to that, keep moving, even if they're tiny, tiny steps. And it's interesting. Just a quick anecdote. I walked the Camino in between Portugal and Spain just as before the pandemic. And I did it in 5.5 days. I had time to kill while I had speaking engagements. And my kids said to me, Mum's going to catch a bus. Mum's not going to walk the whole way. And luckily I had my Fitbit on. I was able to show them that it was like 200,000 steps in 5.5 days. But there were times that I just had to put one foot in front of the other. I didn't want to do it, but I just had to put one foot in front of the other. And then you find a leaps happened. Like, wow, how did I get from there to there? It was all these little steps. But I want to also caution us all, and that is to also look after ourselves. Like, there's times where I'll just close the laptop, I'll just zone out, go do something else, just to refresh myself. So, and it may not be scheduled. It may be just like I've just cracked it.
Yeah. That's great. And I just hope someday I'll be able to say the word scheduled as scheduled. I just said, and we talked about this before the podcast, but I am going to look you up and have you give me some, give me some lessons on how to talk the English version of Australian, because I just love it. I just
Yeah,
love it. I love the accent.
definitely.
Well, all right. So this is the time that we typically move, with your permission, to the Sales Arbiter 7. Now, there was a very popular gentleman by the name of James Lipton, and he used to do this show called Inside the Actor's Studio, and he would have all these actors on, and then he would ask them at the end a series of questions. So I kind of adopted, this from him. And so every guest that I have on, I ask them the Sales Arbiter 7, and it just gives our listeners and viewers a little more insight to Bernadette McClelland. So
Just to mention, I never got the email. Okay.
That's good. That's good. Even better.
Warming a little here at the moment.
Even better. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. All right. So we start with the first question, and just play along, because it really is. It really does help our viewers and listeners to get to know you a little bit better. So, Bernadette, what is your favorite word?
I guess, and I'm wanting to change it, to be quite honest. I'm like, I say awesome a lot.
Awesome.
Oh my God. Okay. Yep. Got it.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. And you do that. You probably use that in some of your presentations. You probably use it, in your everyday life. That's great. What is your least favorite word?
Oh. Dinner.
Why dinner? Tell me about that. Why dinner? Why dinner? Tell me.
Oh no, I don't know.
Dinner's ready.
I hate cooking. I hate cooking. I shouldn't say I hate cooking. My husband is the one who comes home, and it's his form of relaxing to cook dinner at night. It's like, I have to cook dinner. I have to cook dinner. You cook dinner.
So that responsibility lies on him. I love it. I love it. That's great. Okay, dinner. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. So that's good. All right. What's something that could make your day?
More business.
More business. More business. You're going to talk about how they get
stages, on main stages. That's my focus now. Is so that'd absolutely make my day if someone needed somebody to speak at their sales kickoff or conference.
That's great. That's great. Good to hear. Good to hear. Okay, what's something that could ruin your day?
Oh, God. See, you're talking to a positive person here who never kind of goes
I
that
know,
way.
isn't it hard?
Having to cook dinner.
Having to cook dinner. Yeah, I think we just talked about that, right? Having to do it versus having it prepared for you. But even then, when you're called to it, you're like, I don't want to go. I don't want to mess with that. Just give me a power bar. I'll be fine. I love it. I love it.
Something that would ruin my day. Oh God, Crispin. I don't know. Snow. I'm just looking out the window. I think the white stuff can go now. I'm not used to snow. And so I think the white stuff has had its time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, a bad weather day or lots and lots of snow. Not liking that. And that's one of the reasons why I moved from, Northeast Ohio down to Georgia. We don't have that much anymore.
Yeah,
so
there you go. There you go.
That's great. Okay. All right. What sound or noise do you love?
What sound or noise?
Mm-hmm. Do you love?
That's a weird question.
Yeah.
What sound? Oh, I've got a tree right outside my window here. Mm-hmm. And seriously, yes, I'm going with this one. They have different birds over here than Australia, and there's these little birds, and they sing, and yeah, there you go. God,
the birds singing. You like that? That's nice. And maybe when you're, like when you said, when you're detaching, when you're shutting that laptop for a few minutes, and you hear that, or the noise. That's great. Okay. Going on the opposite end of that, what sound or noise do you hate?
Well, there is a fire station up the road from us, and our apartment is kind of facing the road, and it drives the noise is just deafening. So there's that noise, but there's also another noise, and that is our neighbors. And they're domestics at like 2 a.m. So there you go. There's 2.
Yeah, that's not fun. That is not fun. No, that is not fun. I got it. Thank you for that. Okay, one last one. What profession other than your own would you have liked to attempt?
Well, I did want to become a teacher when I left school, but I was too young for training college, so they didn't let me in. I came to Australia instead, but I wished I could sing.
You wish you could sing?
Yeah, I really wish I could sing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you can keep trying. There's still time.
I used to sing at midnight mass, and
And the place would clear out, or what would happen? The place would everybody would leave.
Singing lessons at 25. I thought, I'd come across from New Zealand to Australia, and I went and paid for a singing teacher. And she said after number 2, she suggested I save my money. Well, and I said something to my mom about that, and I said, why didn't you tell me I couldn't sing? And she said, you used to love it so much, Bernadette.
Oh my goodness.
Give me feedback, please.
That is so great. All right. Tell our listeners, our viewers, how do they get a hold of you? How do they get in contact with you? What's the best way? Let's just talk a little bit about that before we close down.
So LinkedIn, clearly LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to my website, BernadetteMcClelland.com, or what I would love it if you could do is to go to shiftanddisrupt.com, 3 words, shiftanddisrupt.com, and register there for the waitlist for my book. When it's launched, which will probably be May, June, it's at the editors now, there'll be resources coming out and wonderful things like that. But I would love your listeners to be part of my world.
That's great. That is so great. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It means the world to me for you to be here. And I always close every episode like this. Let's listen, keep selling and have fun doing it. Thank you so much, Bernadette, for being on today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye now.
This is the reason why you should buy. And we're not asking the most important question, the reason why it was important for them, in their heart of hearts. Like, that's a sale. Then we're going to see results. The mindset, going into every opportunity, saying to yourself, I would love to have the business, but I don't need the business.
When they talk about building their organization just through referral, that means they're missing it. The internet almost shut down because they're like, are you blind? Do you not know what's going on out there? Do you not see what's happening? You just did 250,000 cold calls. Congratulations.